I came into Miami declaring my major before my freshman year. I was dead set from the beginning. Ever since doing that, though, I often get asked, why art education? Or, a little bit more annoyingly, why art in general? I feel like I tell people I want to teach art, and there's this weird misconception that what I'm actually saying is that I want to spend the rest of my life teaching preschoolers how to finger paint and what hand to hold their crayons in. This might come as a shock to some of you, but that's not actually all my job entails. If it were, I feel like a lot more people would be doing it. But I know that saying that makes me sound really defensive and doesn't really help anybody. So for those of you that still need the context and just really want to know why what I'm doing matters, or for those of you that just kind of want my cool X-Men origin story, that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we jump in, I need everybody to take a quick breath with me because one, I'm really nervous. Two, I need everybody to clear their heads a little bit and just come in with a completely blank slate because I need you guys to listen and actually hear what I'm telling you. Because that's going to be the key here. All right? You ready? Let's go. My name is Taya Pennington. I'm 21 years old. I was born on December 27th of 1998, and I didn't cry when I was born. That sounds really dramatic. It's fine though. We're good. My mom actually used to make jokes about it because she used to say that it kind of foretold who I was going to be as a person for the years to come. Until around 7th grade. I remember I crawled into her bed like I was 5 and having a nightmare, and then she asked me what was wrong, and the floodgates just opened up and didn't close for the next 6 years. Every time this would happen, she would ask me what was wrong, and I never really said anything that made much sense, at least not to her. From what she remembers, I used to say stuff like my brain feels like TV static, or my head feels like a balloon. And then the conversation would just kind of be as simple as her asking me, do you need to talk to someone? And I, not entirely understanding what that meant at the ripe age of 12, would feel bad and try to put it all back in my mouth and take back what I said and respond with, no. Because I'm talking to her, aren't I? And if she doesn't get it, then neither is anyone else. I thought that maybe this is normal and it's something I just have to get over. It's a hurdle to jump and a mountain to climb. In the daytime, it was a lot easier to pretend I had this whole getting over it thing down. I had a lot to do as a 12-year-old, actually, the general navigating puberty and the weird experience that is middle school / junior high. I didn't really have very many friends at the time, but the ones I did have were really talented, but they were all individuals who had their own hurdles to jump and their own mountains to climb. I think we found a lot of comfort in each other. I remember we used to bring a notebook to lunch and take turns passing it around the table so we could draw all on the same page. We just drew whatever we thought would make each other laugh, mostly. Though, when I look and I see some of those early drawings now, I feel like I'm looking at a secret language. One that I know I wouldn't be able to recognize had I never known Annie Cottle. I met her my freshman year of high school, pretty early in the first semester, if I remember right. My parents were late picking me up as usual, and I was sort of mindlessly roaming the halls the way that all kids who didn't have a place to go after 7th period did. I remember being confused about why there were still so many people around after school had ended, so I poked my head into this classroom, and it was the one where the first art club meeting of the year was being held. So, within literal seconds of me poking my head in, I was waved in pretty aggressively and handed a worksheet as well as some packaging tape. Annie asked me a bunch of what I felt to be icebreaker questions that I responded to without much enthusiasm. I kind of felt like she was just doing that thing that most of my teachers did at the time, where she would ask me a bunch of questions to know my name and then make me comfortable enough to do the work and then just not talk to me for the rest of the year. But I know now that that's not the case. She had this really interesting classroom dynamic where she wanted a relationship with each student. She asked everyone a bunch of questions and she actually remembered the answers because she cared and she wanted to know you. I also now know how to make a packaging tape cast out of almost anything. Annie and I grew really close, so close to the point that she pulled more than a few strings to make sure I was penciling art classes into my high school schedule, as well as attending art club on the regular. That all eventually morphed into me spending nearly all of my free time in the art room. Oftentimes, I would get notes excusing me from other classes just so I could go back to the art room and sit in the back of making clay or cutting up stuff for sculptures I wanted to make later. This was a really great time for me artistically, but not necessarily academically. So wherever you are, Mrs. Allen from Algebra 2, I am so sorry. Sometimes I would sit on the computer in the back that nobody used and play Tetris while Annie and some of the other students she had this bond with would stop in and chat. Annie was kind of like a second mom to me to a degree. And this relationship slowly became more and more important to me because my home life deteriorated to the point of non-existence, like really rapidly after the first time that I met her. By the time I was entering my senior year, I was preparing to enter what I still consider the worst period of my life so far, and Annie was a first-hand witness to the fallout stemming from all of that. You see, my parents finally got that divorce they'd been wanting for like 12 years, which led to my mother moving 3 hours away with my younger sisters in tow. And I moved in with my grandparents in order to finish out my school years in the only place I'd ever known, and also to graduate with the friends that I'd had since kindergarten. So, all of that paired with the fact that I was still telling people sometimes that my brain felt like mashed potatoes just set me up to be the perfect 18-year-old basket case. I ended up slacking off a lot more than I should have during this time period. My grades started slipping, I stopped hanging out with friends less and less, even though the only other thing that I was ever doing was sitting silently in the same room with my grandpa and rewatched the same episodes of MASH that we had seen at least twice in the same week. I wasn't sleeping very well either, and usually when I was, it was in places that weren't really optimal for it. On one of the days, I made my napping nest under the art room desk, and Annie had finally had enough, I guess. So she pulled me out into the hall, and she asked me this question that I've been struggling to answer for about as long as I've been alive. She just looks at me and she goes, "Taya, what's wrong?" My efforts to be elusive here when I was answering were futile because she would jump over every wall that I tried to build between us. I remember a few rounds of insisting that I was just tired and telling her that I would straighten up in hopes of her just letting me go back inside, but she kept pressing me on it, until finally the only thing that I could do was meet her gaze with a weird stinging behind my eyes and in my throat, and I just told her, "I'm feeling really bad lately." So she pauses for a second, as if she's gonna let me breathe before telling her more, and when the more didn't come, she pushes forward, but this time a little bit more gently, and I told her I didn't know how to say anymore, and she said, "Then show me." She made me dig out the sketchbook we were supposed to keep for class and told me to take a second and draw how I felt. I remember thinking it was a little bit odd at first, but after a moment I began scribbling on the page. And I don't really remember what the first one looked like, but if I had to guess, I would say it looked something like these other things that I made at the time. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. After I did this the first time, I did in fact stick with it because it worked. So time and time again, I was making these weird drawings with texts or symbols on it or behind it, or sometimes nowhere in the work at all. It said what I needed to say without uttering even a whisper. Every time I made a page, I felt a brick come off of my chest, and it felt so good. Actually feeling myself get lighter little by little and finally having something I felt like I was good at was essential in not only my healing, but also my growth as a person. I found my identity through the artwork I was making. I used these little art journals as the crutch to hold myself up on days when I felt like I would never know balance, and I felt like if it was this helpful for me, it would probably be helpful for other people too. So then comes this time period where I'm recommending this to everyone I knew who'd been in a rut, and they would always take it in these wildly different directions. And then when they would let me look at it later, something felt really intimate about it. I feel like I was looking at the inside of someone else's brain. A part that you don't often see just by chit-chatting in the halls at lunch. A lot of the work felt really raw and really vulnerable. And when I saw it, I feel like we both always felt a little bit closer than we did before. It was all just really intense. So you can imagine the flip-flops that my heart did when Annie told me that she entered one of my journals in the county art show without telling me. And then maybe you can also imagine the weird feeling in the pit of my gut when said journal won Best in Show for that year, when my literal diary paved my way to a scholarship for college. It was such a strange experience. People were looking at my brain and I think they were really seeing me for the first time. Raw, unfiltered, and without time to be apologetic for feeling things. I was showing them something, and to a degree, they were finally getting it without any questions asked. Something happened to me then that I still can't really explain now. I was standing there in front of all those people in the gallery, and when they handed me the little blue ribbon for my work, something in my brain just clicked together for the first time in like 18 years. I knew then and there what I wanted to go on to do, and it felt like the only thing that was ever going to make any sense to me. Because we all live in this world where people are using art as some kind of coping tool in their own way. People write songs about bad breakups, we write books about great adventures, and we make movies about things like life and death and injustice. And I, and people like me, keep art journals to keep track of what we dub our bad brain days. However, I feel a lot of these tools come to us in our later years, after we've all become a little bit too acquainted with these scary things that we're making work about. There are new people coming into the world every single moment of every single day, and not all of them are going to know how to find words to describe the things that they're feeling. I mean, some of them might, but they'll likely be in a situation where their immediate safety net doesn't understand what they're saying when they tell them that their entire brain feels like how a pool floaty smells. I want to make art for myself, but I want to teach it to others too. I want to be the bridge between new people and these tools because I want to create a space where people feel like they're seen for all that they are, where they feel heard. Because that's all I ever wanted when I was a kid. And I feel like now that I've been given that, I want to gift it to other people too. So, that's what my job is, and that's why it matters. And I know some of you are going to have some hot takes and opinions on all of this. So, I'll be waiting for the finger painting you make about it in the mail.